So welcome everybody. We're really excited to have you here. I'm Tina. As many of you know, many of you found me on YouTube, so thank you so much for watching my channel. That means a lot to me, and that you chose to bring me and my team along for your journey. Thank you so much. Just a couple quick introductory things. I guess just a little bit about me. I've been with VIPKid since July of 2017, and I absolutely love it. I actually went to Beijing in August and met many of my students, which was definitely the highlight of my VIPKid career. It was so much fun. But I spend most of my day helping folks like you to get hired and build businesses in VIPKid. That's my passion. So thank you for bringing me along for that. And way back, I guess a little over a year ago, I started the Facebook community, and the very first person who came out and was super helpful in that group was Lisa. And so when it came time for me to grow and get more support to help you all, she was the first person that I thought of. So I brought Lisa on board in January. So you'll see her name, and you'll also see Melanie and Annie. You'll see their names as well. They mostly help out on Facebook. Lisa kind of does everything. So you'll see her in Zoom, you'll see her on Facebook, email, all those good places. So that's a little bit about me. And then Lisa, will you introduce yourself a little more, please?
Sure, I'm coming to you from Idaho, so I get up very, very early to teach students, and it works out really well for my life because I get to wake up with these wonderful, happy children in China, and then when the children in China are ready to go to sleep, my children in Idaho wake up, and I get to be mom during the day. So it's been a really nice way to balance all the things that I want to do in my life. And then in the midst of all the kid activities that go on at my house during the day, I hop online and get to know all of you. So that's always a lot of fun, and welcome everyone.
Yeah, we're excited to have you all here. I know from seeing you on Facebook and email and from the registrations that we kind of have people from all different walks of life, experiences, and different stages of the hiring process, which is really exciting. So does anybody want to quickly share why you are excited to go for VIPKid? Anybody want to share their why, their reason? No pressure, but it's kind of
I'll
fun
do
to
it.
hear.
I'll do it.
Yeah, Ashley, go ahead.
Okay, so hi everyone. My name is Ashley Caban, and the reason that I decided I wanted to join VIP Kids is because I have no children, but I take care of my bedridden grandma 24/7. So I needed a job to be able to help pay the bills from home, and I'm really excited to be able to teach all of the children from China and deal with the scheduling and all of that. Excited to be
Wonderful.
here.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. That takes a heart of gold to do that. So good for you. And yes, this job
Thank
sounds
you.
like it's great. It's great for anybody who, for whatever reason, is at home or would like to be at home. Absolutely. Happy to have you here, Ashley. Anybody else
Thank
want to
you.
share? Scott, go ahead.
I've joined VIP Kids because I want to teach in a way that focuses on students directly without the governance of public school systems, charter school systems, etc. So I'm staring out the window at Guadalajara, and yeah, it's a beautiful day, and I'm excited to experiment. I've wanted to do this for a long time, so this is exciting.
Wonderful. Awesome, Scott. We're so happy to have you here.
Thank you.
All right. Awesome. Well, everybody has their own story, and maybe someday you'll want to share yours in the Facebook group, whatever, no pressure. But we're just really excited. Whatever brought you here, we're happy you're here. So in this session, we will use some slides kind of as jumping points. I'm going to just pull up the slides right now that I'm thinking of it. But before I do that, actually, I'm going to mute everyone just to get rid of background noise, nothing personal. And I'll do that periodically if we start hearing some background noise. So let me share our slides here. Okay, so getting hired. Here we go. Can I get a thumbs up if you can see the slides? Yes, awesome. You'll be doing a lot of that in VIPKid, so that was good practice. Okay. So the purpose of this session, as you know, since you registered, is we want to help you think like a VIPKid teacher. A lot of the people in this group have experience teaching in some capacity. I mean, you have to have some experience with kids to even get your foot in the door with VIPKid, but not a lot of people came with experience in the online classroom, and it's kind of like its own beast. So that's really the purpose of today's session. We want to kind of break it down for you in a way that is easy to figure out what you're doing. So a couple of quick tips for Zoom, and these tips will help you on later on as well, because VIPKid teachers, once you're hired, you can attend workshops, and they take place in Zoom as well. So learning these controls now will help you later on too. Anyway, up here in the upper right-hand corner, you should, depending on what device you're using, you should see exit full screen. Sometimes if you're on a Mac, you may have to go to view options first and then click exit full screen. And then we suggest that you click participants and chat at the bottom. What that does is it shimmies everything over to the side so that you see everything like this on one screen. Way easier. So what we suggest doing is if you would like to share something, ask a question, feel free to unmute yourself. This mute me button turns into an unmute button and back and forth. So we just ask that you unmute, talk, and then mute yourself again so that we get rid of background noise. But you are welcome to speak at any time when you have something you'd like to share. We would love that. If you have something that maybe you're brewing and you want to like us to come to you soon, you can raise hand, like click the raise hand button. If you raise your actual hand, we probably won't see you right away. We do scroll through and keep an eye on everybody, but we won't see everyone all the time. So just keep that in mind. And then we encourage you to use the chat box as much as you would like. Typically how these sessions go is Lisa and I are both here hosting. So one of us will kind of man the chat box while the other person is leading the discussion. You know, we kind of roll with it. Sometimes we're just having a ball and we're both talking on a slide, or both of us are in the chat, you know, whatever. We'll roll with it. But we just want this to be your session. So however you want to do it, just go for it. Okay. Any questions before we get started? Any questions? I'm scrolling through in case anybody's like, wait, where's the raised hand? Okay.
They look ready to go.
They do look ready. I love it. Awesome. Okay, cool. So a couple of quick reminders. I already talked about that. We'll try to be on topic so that we get through everything. We will answer questions throughout and at the end. So if we kind of pass by something and you forgot to ask a question, we'll probably come back to it, or you can just ask at the end. If you're a note taker like me, I encourage you to take notes. Hopefully you saw the worksheet for the session. You didn't have to print it out. I like to print stuff out, but you can follow along throughout the session if you would, if you would like, and take notes. And then we just ask no video recording or photography. Besides, of course, we're recording this so that we can help out people who couldn't make it to the session. Okay, I see Ashley, do you have a question for us?
Yes, I'm trying to click on participants in chat. Am I supposed to only see the slide at the moment, or am I supposed to see the chat and the participants on the right side of the slide? I didn't understand.
Yeah, it should shimmy over for you. I'll show you again. It might be whatever device you're using. It might look a little different. What device are you on?
On the computer, on the desktop right now.
Okay. Do you see either view options or exit full screen at the top anywhere if you hover?
I see view options.
Okay. What do you see if you click that?
Zoom ratio, hide video panel, request remote control, annotate and exit full screen, and side-by-side mode.
Exit full screen. Try that.
Okay. Okay, I see it now.
That look good?
I see the participants, and I don't see the chat where I can type.
You might just have to click chat again at the bottom bar.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, now I have it. Okay.
Okay, perfect. Okay, awesome.
I'll unmute myself. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, cool. Let me just make sure we're all squared away. Okay, yeah, so the raise hand is just over here. When you have the participants box open, you'll see it there. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so we kind of crammed a bunch of YouTube videos and ideas about VIPKid into one video for you. That was our 5 skills video. And there are definitely more than 5 skills that are important to becoming a successful VIPKid teacher, but these are 5 that you will hear about all the time. These are really, really important ones. So there are blanks on your worksheet. You can fill that out if you want. We will touch on all of these skills throughout the session today. TPR is something that people often are unfamiliar with when they're new to VIPKid, so we'll definitely practice that a little bit. Modeling, the I do, we do, you do. Prop usage, you don't need to go crazy. We'll give you some ideas for using props effectively. Getting your students speaking. Student output is probably the most important thing in VIPKid. We definitely want to get our students talking, and then correcting the errors effectively. We'll talk about exact skills for how to do that. So, alrighty, let's go ahead and not quite yet. So I just wanted to remind you that we are going to go from what to how in this session. So a lot of what you find in the resources that are provided to you and that you find on YouTube is what. This is what TPR looks like. This is what this is. This is what props are, right? But we really want you to know how to do it and how to do it quickly. So we want you to be able to teach any type of slide, right? So we're not going to go through slide by slide a specific lesson because that won't help you long term. You need to be able to do that on your own, right? Regardless of whatever lesson comes across your screen. So we are going to take a few different types of teaching slides and think through the process with you. So Lisa and I came up with something called the question framework. So basically what we do is we look at a slide and we think about 4 questions that we ask ourselves. We go in order, questions 1 through 4, and by the end of question 4, we've got an idea of exactly how we plan to teach that slide. Sounds pretty easy, right? Yeah, it's not that hard. So we're going to look at these 3 types of slides. There are definitely more than 3, but these are 3 that are especially helpful to you as a new someone in the hiring process and as a new teacher, because you'll probably see these types of slides pretty often. So we are actually going to do a modeling. We're going to model modeling by doing I do, we do, you do in this session. So first, with the phonics slide, we will kind of talk you through our thinking. So the first one will take a little bit longer because we're just kind of telling you how we're going through this process, right? We're teaching you the framework. Then in we do, we hope that you will join us in brainstorming. So that's for both of these other types of slides, new vocabulary and creating full sentences. And then the you do means that you get to go and practice some more after this session. So whatever slides that means to you. All right, so let's dive in. Phonics. What do we think of when we hear the word phonics? You can unmute yourself or type in the chat box. I would love to hear what's the first thing that comes to mind.
The alphabet.
Ooh, yeah. The
letter sound.
Yeah, sounds of the letters.
Letter sounds, sounds of the letters. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And how they all fit together, right? Yep. So, okay. We are looking at a phonics slide. So this is our phonics slide. It's not the most typical phonics slide for VIPKid, I'll just let you know that, because typically phonics slides will have at least 3 examples on here. So you got to kind of work with what they give you. They kind of gave you a little less to work with just to see how you did, if that makes sense, in the hiring process. A lot of slides that have phonics on them will have maybe 6 to 10 examples. So you have a lot more practice on typical phonics slides. But for the purpose of the hiring process, this is what we're working with. So the first question that we ask is, what is the objective? I have a little cheat sheet for you here on the right. So what is the objective? We can also think of this as, what's the point, right? What's the point of this slide? So the first place that I look, of course, let me back up a second. Overall, actual VIPKid lessons have overarching objectives, right? There are some objectives that kind of are across different slides, right? But for the purpose of the hiring process, it's a little jumbled. So typically that's why we kind of look at one slide at a time and we're like, okay, what's the objective of this one slide, right? So anyway, we are looking at this phonics slide, and the first place I'm going to look is down here at the bottom. And I'll read it for you because I know it's a little small. It says, tips. Teacher reads letter name and sound of each letter and demonstrates how to blend the sounds together. Okay, so my first question when I read that is, okay, so that's what the teacher's doing, but what's the student doing? What do we want the student to do? Because at the end of the day, is the objective about what I can do? No, they know I can speak English already, right? It's not about me, it's about the student. So what do I want my student to be able to do by the end of this slide, right? Before I click on to the next slide, what is the objective that we should meet? So what do you think? I'll kind of see if you guys are catching on to my thinking here. What do you think is the objective on this slide? Anybody want to sum it up for us, what you think?
To teach the child how to blend letter sounds into a
Yeah.
word.
Yeah, absolutely, Sarah. And we want the student to be able to do it also by the end, right? So it's kind of like two pieces. So yes, we do it, absolutely. And we want to be sure that it actually got absorbed, right? That the student can like spit it back out at us. And not just spit it back out, but actually do that skill. So that's why when I was saying, when we first look at this slide, that there are only 2 examples, it's a little trickier when there are only 2 examples to know for sure that your student got it, right? When you have like 6 or 8 examples, it's pretty easy to know, like if the student's like bam, 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 cranking them out, your student's probably good, met the objective, right? But anyway, so yes, thank you, Sarah. We want to think about teaching how to make those blends and also hearing our student do it. So the objective is to get our student to do that. Yes, for sure. Okay, moving on to question number 2.
The question 2 is, what materials should I use? Our materials are used in order to meet that objective that we just talked about. So we don't want to just hold up random things for fun. We like fun, but we want to make sure that our materials are supporting that objective for the student. So this is where you get to bring your own individual creativity to the VIPKid lesson and have fun with your student while keeping in mind question number 1. Materials are a great way to help build repetition. We can't really expect a child to learn a foreign language just saying things one time. We need that repeating in there. And the best way to get your student to stay along with you, stay engaged in the lesson, is to make the repetitions different and more interesting. So I always think of what I already have with me when I'm thinking about materials, because I like things to be easy for me so I can focus on my student. Right? So the things that I bring with me to every lesson are my screen, my voice, and my body. So those are the first 3 things I'm going to work on using. First of all, with my body, we just talked about TPR. If there's a way that I can use my hands to help my student understand a concept, then I'm going to do it, because guess what my student brings to every lesson? Their hands. So if we can be talking about the ball, and the student can also do the ball, that is great for helping them build memory and be able to recall that word later. So anytime that I can put some TPR into my lesson, I'm going to do it. My voice is also a material to me, because I can change my voice with each repetition of a word. I might use a high voice, a low voice. I might break out my paper microphone, very nice and cheap, and we might sing a little during the lesson. Sometimes if a sentence is hard for my student to say, I might sing it and they might get it faster that way. Different students, different things work for them. The nice thing about incorporating song or different kinds of voices into your lesson is it helps students understand words in a different way, because their native language, Mandarin, is a tonal language. And a tonal language means that different inflections in their voice on the same sound can make different words. So like the word she in Spanish, in Chinese.
If you were paying attention.
Right. Well, I did teach a unit about Peru and Brazil and speaking Spanish this week. So yeah, that's why Spanish is on my mind.
Good times.
In any case, the word she in Chinese, if you have just a flat inflection, it'll mean a completely different thing than she with a raised voice. In English, of course, our words don't work that way. Cat and cat are the same four-legged creature. So when you add variety to your voice, you're helping your Chinese students understand that words work differently in English. Okay, so we have TPR, we have a voice. You also have your screen for every lesson. Now, what's interesting about the screen in VIPKid is when you draw on it, it doesn't work the way you would think at first. And this really tripped me up as a new teacher, so I want to show it to you. You can draw on your screen. So this is my pretend mouse right now. So I'm clicking down on my mouse and I'm drawing on my screen. My student cannot see any of this until I release my mouse. So if you're trying to indicate something but you're not actually releasing your mouse, your student has no idea what you're doing. So if you want to indicate something on your screen, you'll want to get in the habit of a quick circle and release, or a quick underline and release. And it works the opposite way as well. Your student may very well be drawing a lovely picture for you on their iPad, but as long as their finger is touching the screen, you won't know what they're drawing. It's once they take their finger off, then everything shows up at once. So every once in a while you can say, oh, my student was really busy the last 2 minutes, because there'll be this elaborate thing drawn on the screen, right? So in any case, quick use of the screen to indicate where I'm looking, that's material to me because it helps make it more clear to my student. Okay, now, those kinds of materials are things that people don't really think of right away. They think of visuals with materials. So here is one example of a visual or a prop for a material. I stole magnetic letters from my children. If you have children in your life anywhere, whether they're at your house or someone else's, and you can borrow some of their toys or other accessories, go for it. It's a great way to get through the hiring process and beyond. And what's great for me is my kids are asleep while I'm teaching anyways, so they do not care if I take their stuff. So there's a lot of different visuals you could use for any VIPKid lesson. For phonics, I like my magnetic letters just because I can slide them really easily, and it kind of reinforces that idea of blending sounds together. If you don't have magnetic letters, you don't need to go buy something. You could also just write the words on your whiteboard on a paper with a clipboard so it's not wobbly. You could use index cards and post-it notes. I have a lot of index cards and post-it notes around my desk. I use them all the time because they're cheap and easy. Now, one thing you might notice, it's really hard to see my word back here. If you're using a prop that's smaller, remember to use your space. Your space is also one of your materials that's always in your online classroom. If it's small, you need to bring it in so your student can see better. Okay, it makes it much more effective and more fun as well. You also might notice when I'm using my space, you can't really see my prop. This is kind of a problem, isn't it? Hard for a student to follow along when they can't see what you're doing. So I always lean to the side to make sure that I share the space so my face and especially my mouth is visible along with my prop. Okay, so share your space with your prop. And this way I can use my voice and I can use my prop to repeat the same word over and over again without my student, drifting off to la la land because they're bored with me. So adding variety for repetition so I can get to that objective of getting my student to blend a word.
Yes, thank you, Lisa. And remember that VIPKid, well, you might not know this yet, VIPKid flips the classroom for you. So it's not like all of your words will be backwards or anything like that. I remember that was one of my concerns. I actually wrote everything backwards during the hiring process and forwards on different boards because I didn't know how it was going to work. But in the actual hiring process and when you're teaching, everything will flip for you. So that may take a little bit to get used to because you're probably not used to that. Like how you're seeing yourself right now on Zoom, like if you lift up your right hand, it looks like a mirror, right? In the VIPKid classroom, it would be the opposite, which is good because then all of your words are the correct way, but it will take a little mental switch to understand that that's what's happening.
Yeah, so with phonics, I do some TPR with phonics with my kids too, going like this to make words. But my first letter has to be my right hand. So it has to be like egg, bag. So that is the one thing. I'm really glad that the words are the correct direction, but just remember right hand first if you're going to do this.
Yes, for sure. Awesome. Any questions about this? Any materials related questions? I mean, we focused more on a phonics slide, but you can probably gather what some other props would be, right? Any kind of animals, food, things that you have that are related to the lesson, right? Awesome. All right, we will talk a little bit more about props very shortly. Okay, so moving on to question number 3. Question 3 is, what words will I say? So I want to teach something. I'm going to teach this slide, but using a whiteboard. And I want your feedback afterward. So let's see. Who can I pick on? Sierra, do you want to be my student? Okay. If you can unmute, I'll try to unmute you from here. Maybe.
There we go. Yes,
Okay,
sure.
awesome. Okay. So I'm not able to see both of us at the same time, but that's okay. I'll watch you. So I might fall out of the frame a little bit, but that's okay. You guys know what I'm working at. Okay. Are you ready, Sierra?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I want everyone to watch, and then after I teach Sierra, I would love to hear your feedback. I'll ask for Sierra's feedback first, but I want to hear everybody's feedback. Okay, Sierra, let's go. Okay, so we have the letter B. B makes sound ba.
Ba.
Okay, good. Then what's that?
Egg.
Okay, so you put them together, and then what does it sound like when you put them together?
Bag.
Okay, good. So then what's this?
Leg.
Okay, good. Okay, so I would love to hear your feedback first, Sierra. How did you feel being my student?
Definitely too fast, especially if English wasn't my first language. I probably wouldn't get it that quickly.
Right. Yeah, good. That was definitely one of the takeaways. You all understood what I was saying, right? Because you all speak English. But if you did not speak the language, that would be so confusing, right? And just like demoralizing, like, oh my gosh, I don't understand anything. It's just letters and I don't get it. Yeah, absolutely. Anything else that you noticed or anybody else noticed?
You weren't using phonics. You were saying the letter, well, you're saying what we think of when we think of the letter. So B, but it's not, it's like B, sort of. Not, you don't have the UH inflection on it.
Right. Yeah, so I wasn't really giving her a good example to work with either. Good, Sarah. What else? Anything else?
No TPR.
No TPR. Yeah. I mean, I just kind of ran through that, right? Absolutely. Anybody have other comments? How was my modeling? Scott?
It was rather quick. You didn't isolate the L sounds and then blend it with the EG. You just started with the B and then the EG, and then you just went right to leg without sort of blending each word.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I also just kind of expected her to know what to do, right? Yeah, I ran through it. So yeah, thank you, Scott. So we definitely want to think about, like, you will feel like you're speaking slowly, slow it down even more. It's not talking to them baby-like, you know, this is not their first language. So we really need to slow it down even more than we think we need to and make it simpler. You can always come back and help your student too. So like if I wanted to see if she could do the L sound, I could see if she could do it and then come and help her if she couldn't. So this is why it's kind of tricky, like what I was saying, that we only have 2 examples here. I think it would be way easier to do 3 examples, right? Because then it's really obvious that the first one you do, I do, right? I'll just show you how to do the bag blend. And then the second one, we do it together. And then if there were a third one, you could just let your student run with it. But it's a little more complicated when you only have 2. So yeah, absolutely. So in the beginning, I would probably want to do something more like this, right? This one, let me back up. This slide is a little bit funky for a phonics slide also because it says that we're supposed to say the letter name. A lot of times we don't say the letter name because the student should already know the letter and it's more about the sound, right? So we don't really want to confuse our student and make them think that we're blending the sounds B and egg and B egg, right? So personally, I don't focus on the letter name on slides like this. The teacher tips you can kind of do as you'd like. So just keep that in mind. You can interpret this as you will. But anyway, so I would probably isolate this sound and make sure my student could do it first, right? So like, B. And as Sarah said, right, it's not B, it's B, like almost like a B-I-H if you had to add extra letters to it. So you're really trying to make it short and sweet, just B. B. Try to get your student to say it a couple ways, and then get the egg sound in there, right? So you point, egg, egg, right? And then you bring them together and help your student say them together. Bag. All right, and then you would come down here and, you know, like I said, you could see if they could make this sound, You know, you could kind of point, scratch your head, cup your ear, and if your student doesn't say anything, you can help them out, right? Ooh, ooh, right? And then come over here. Since they just practiced it, they should be familiar. You could just point, cup your ear. So you're kind of handing off responsibility and then just see if they can do it the last time. Okay, so you want to think about gradually releasing the responsibility over to your student. Any questions about that? I know it's like such an easy slide, but there's so much happening on it.
I have a question.
Sure.
So we're supposed to make the phonics sound for the first letter, but not for the egg. What I mean by that is that I don't have to do the phonics for the E and the G, just say egg.
Typically not, yeah. Typically, if we are doing these sounds together and they're already in like one section, then we already assume they can make the sound together, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Like if it were separated, like if it had b, e, g, then we would want to separate them when we're speaking, but we're assuming that they already can make the egg sound. So
Okay,
that was a
thank
really
you.
good question, Ashley. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, so the main takeaway from this slide is when you are doing phonics slides, don't say anything more than you have to and slow it down, right? So something else that I see people do a lot is they will, especially if they've been classroom teachers before, they have the most beautiful introductions to things and transitions, and it's just gorgeous, right? So they would like come to this slide and be like, okay, Susan, now we're going to do a blending sounds. Are you ready? You know, and it's just, no, you don't need that. So don't say the name of the slide. Don't say, now we're going to do this. Just jump right in. On these beginner lessons in particular, you just jump right in. I know it might feel choppy, and in the hiring process, it is especially choppy, but just go for it. Okay, so what words will I say? Keep it short and sweet. Okay, moving on to question number 4. This one's a lot of fun.
Actually, this one is my favorite one.
Same.
So let's talk about what errors we can anticipate with our students. What's really nice about question number 4 is that we'll think through it together here this once, and then it's just kind of in your back pocket, and you don't need to start from square one each time rethinking the whole thing. So that's part of the reason I like this one. I also think it's really interesting to learn a little bit about Chinese. So, and I won't call it Spanish this time, y'all. So question 1, 2, and 3 are things that we can really plan out ahead of time before we ever see our student. But when we arrive in our classroom, whether it's with a pretend student like an interviewer or a mock class mentor or a real life student, there will be errors that are made. And one of the most important things, parts of your job as a VIPKid teacher is to catch those errors, because these parents could put their child in front of a video and learn English that way, but the video doesn't know when you make a mistake. So that's what makes us unique and different from a video, is that we can catch those mistakes and help correct them in a positive way that keeps our students engaged and willing to learn English and work with us. So there are 3 main types of errors that Tina and I kind of broke down into categories, and pretty much all errors fit into one of these categories. So the first error miss, the 3 misses there, is a missing article. So you might hear your students say something like, I see bicycle. They just won't have an article in front of their noun. The reason this happens is because in Mandarin, there's no such thing as an article. It just doesn't exist in any form in their language. So they're just not used to putting some extra little word in front of a noun. When I hear a missing article, there's a couple of different things I can choose to do to fix that error. Sometimes I decide that the best course of action is to give the correction to my student. Just tell them the right answer. So to tell a student a right answer in a sentence like I see bicycle, I will finger count. I start with my thumb because that gives me more fingers to work with. I don't run out quite as quickly. And I'll say, I see a bicycle. What's great about finger counting is the student can see how many words they need to say, and I can emphasize the missing word. Now, let's say I have a student where we've done that a couple of times, or I know that that student is a little beyond just needing the entire answer given to them. I can also cue the error correction with my handy A on a stick. I have a lot of things on popsicle sticks in my classroom, and I just scotch tape them on. This is one of my magnetic letters. it works for me. So instead of giving the whole answer, I might just go, I see bicycle. And that might be all my student needs in order to, oh yes, this teacher has told me 1,000,000 times, I need in front of a noun, and they will produce the correct sentence for me. I also use this kind of error correction a lot more often with an older student. So a more capable student or an older student. If it is a beginning level 2 student or a very, very young student, I'm just gonna give them the answer and that's okay. They will learn through hearing the correct form over and over again. The second kind of error miss is mispronunciation. And there are 1,000,000 kinds of mispronunciations. They happen through all age levels, all English abilities. The younger kids in the lower levels tend to make single sound errors. So for example, there are some sounds that just aren't in Mandarin, like the TH sound or W or L's and R's that just aren't used as often in Mandarin. And those are a little harder for our students to copy correctly at first. It takes a lot of practice and a lot of emphasizing what your mouth is doing. A lot of learning English in these beginning levels is learning to use their mouth and jaw and tongue in a different way. So it's actually, I have a kid in speech therapy too, and my gosh, the parallels between the two, just all day long. I'm pulling out my VIPKid stuff with my own 5-year-old. So for sounds, I usually come in closer to my screen. I use my space, and I use my fingers to emphasize what's going on so they can kind of isolate what is happening. So like this. Wah, wah, and get them to do it too. Or they love TH because they get to see my tongue and they think that's funny.
Get up close and personal.
Up close and personal, yes. Thank goodness that there's a screen and thousands of miles between us because I'm not sure I'd want to get that close to my student in real life, but it works wonderfully on the screen. There's really not necessarily a way to cue mispronunciation of a single sound, so I always just give them the correct sound and we practice it a few times really up close.
Yeah.
With longer words and older students, mispronunciation sort of becomes more like dropping syllables or mangling syllables. So like in the word neighborhood. That's a lot of syllables to remember and a lot of things your mouth does all at once. So kids will drop or mangle something. So for those kinds of errors, I can break it up by clapping. Classroom teachers might know this as segmenting, right? Neighborhood, and have my student do it. Or I can use the chat box in my classroom or my whiteboard and either write out or type out the word with slashes between it. And just breaking it down will help them to eventually build it back up into the whole word.
Yeah.
And and there's one other fun kind of mispronunciation that's very particular to Mandarin, and that is called a schwa. So here I have the word wig. My student was reading all these short I words one day, and they came out wigga, figga, migga, bigga. Every word had an on the end. This extra on the end of a word is called a schwa. Sometimes I'll hear other people do it in English, but mostly it's Mandarin speakers who like to add an on the word because in Mandarin, a lot of words end in a vowel. So there are a couple ways you can take care of a schwa. You can just use TPR and really emphasize that you're shortening your words, like wig, and emphasize that you're closing your mouth, wig. Or you can go wigga, wig, wig. Any way that you emphasize that you're shortening the word will work. With this particular student, that was not working that day, so I took one of my index cards that live next to my computer. I wrote out wigga, and I just ripped off the schwa. And she said all the rest of the words without a schwa at all. It was wonderful. So it's nice to have something like index cards or a whiteboard next to your computer for those times when you're like, I was not expecting that error. I anticipate well, but you pulled a new one on me. You have something you can whip out and work with. The third kind of miss is the missing S. There is no conjugation of verbs in Mandarin. When they are changing the pronoun in their sentence, they just add an extra word to the sentence. So when we're trying to say something like he plays, that S gets dropped really frequently. Now, the thing about S's is they're about a split second in time. They are very, very small sounds that we as native speakers pick up on pretty quickly, but this is part of why it's important that you do have your headset and you have the volume turned up. And anytime that you do instructional TPR to say, I'm listening to my student, have that be a reminder to you that you really need to listen to your student now and kind of get out of your own head about what you're going to say next, because it's really important that you catch those little split-second errors. Just like with missing articles, I can choose to either give the correct form to my student, he plays, and kind of emphasizing the S that's missing, or you guessed it, I have an S on a stick. It works. This is the hardest working letter in my classroom. So after we've kind of practiced the skill over time or through the lesson, and I know the student really knows that there's supposed to be an S on certain verbs, right? I might just need to hold up my S on a stick and that student can correct the error, him or herself, and feel good about their English skills.
Yeah.
So there are yes, go ahead.
So sometimes, Lisa was kind of demonstrating this a little bit earlier. Sometimes it's a good idea also, like if it's something that you've been over before with this student, yes, you could hold up a letter. Sometimes you can just make the mistake back to your student and see if your student catches it, right? So like your student might say, he play with a ball. And you say, he play with a ball. He play, right? And just kind of look confused and like you got hung up on that word, and students will have a lot of fun correcting you. So that's just something that I like to do. A lot of times they'll just be talking and then afterwards they'll be like, he play? They'll be like, oh, right? And then they correct me, and it's a little nicer because then it's like they corrected themselves. So it kind of depends on the student though, if you're able to do that. Just
Totally.
something to think about.
It doesn't matter what nation my students are from, right? They love to correct me. And
yes.
they think it's just so funny when the teacher makes a mistake.
Absolutely. Oh, wait, Lisa, before we go on, I just wanted to address the question in the chat box.
Okay, go
Finger
ahead.
in there. The question was, does it matter if we make the A, right? Like I see a bicycle, like a or a. And this is kind of a matter of personal preference. VIPKid does not have a firm stance either way. I would say if you naturally say a, go ahead and say it like that. Most people would typically say more often. So it doesn't necessarily, it's not going to make or break anything in your classroom. And if your student goes and sees different teachers, your student will probably get exposed to different ways of people talking anyway. So I typically say just because then they don't get confused about the letter name A, and that's just how I speak. So it's kind of easier for me to speak that way, and it feels more natural. So it's your personal preference. I would say if you naturally speak like just go for it. That's what I would say. But anyway,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Lisa. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. And I remembered one more thing that I forgot. See, that's why there's two of us here.
Exactly.
Because we're only human. In terms of conjugating verbs too, a lot of teachers use a verb chart. So that's a list of pronouns and the verb forms next to them. So it'd say like, I play, you play, he plays. So if you have something like that or want to use something like that, that's another great way that you can kind of cue the error correction. Tina's got one there.
This is from Teachers Pay Teachers for Free.
Yeah.
There are tons of free resources out there.
There are.
You know, if you think, oh, it'd be nice to have X, Y, and Z, just look for it. I guarantee it's somewhere.
Okay, so let's advance the slides and talk about the 4 steps for when you hear an error. So we kind of have some categories of errors that we're going to be listening for. So what happens when you hear one? There are 4 steps that I like to use in order to correct the error, which is what the parents want, but to do it in a positive way so that my student stays engaged in the lesson and does not shut down and feel like, oh, I didn't do it right and now I just don't want to try anything at all, because it's really hard to get student output if your student has shut down. So when I hear an error, the first thing I do is I praise my student for saying something. Just a short praise. Like we just talked about in question 3, choosing the words that you're going to say carefully. That applies to praise as well. You want a really short phrase like good job or nice, and a little TPR helps a lot as well, because my student might not know what nice means, but if they see my thumbs up, they know it's praise. Okay, so I praise my student, And then I choose if I'm going to correct the error by giving it to them or cueing it. So this is when it's handy to have those common errors kind of in my back pocket with a plan, so that I don't waste a whole lot of seconds like thinking about, what am I gonna do? There was supposed to be an S, right? I just sort of already have a plan that I can roll out almost instantly. After I've done something to address the error, I ask for student output with my TPR. Okay, so it's not enough just to give the correct form to the student. I need to hear it back from them. That helps me maintain that teacher-student speaking ratio too, because it needs to not be the teacher Lisa show. It needs to include lots and lots of student output, because that's how my students will learn best. And then my final step is to praise my student again. Sometimes step 2 and 3 will need to be repeated, and that's okay. We don't go through 15 repetitions because you'll lose your student in the meantime. There are always chances in the future to improve things more, but we'll try to correct an error a few times, and then we'll need to move on for the sake of timing and pacing, and that's okay. A lot of times, really, my students, they get the correction. They may need the correction again in a few minutes, but usually they will get it with me while we work. Notice during my 4 steps, I never actually tell my student that they made an error. They know. Once I've provided a correction or a cue, they know it was an error, but as long as I'm not pointing it out and I'm just giving them the tools to succeed, they don't shut down, they just keep going with me. So those are my 4 steps.
Awesome. Thank you, Lisa. So how do we think we would correct an error? Let's just use an example from this slide. First of all, what do you think would be a common error on this slide that your student would make? What might you hear? You can unmute yourself or type in the chat box.
They might swap out the E sound for the I sound, so
Ooh.
big instead of beg.
Yeah, absolutely. Vowel sounds are tricky for our students for sure. Yeah, okay, so let's run with that one. So if our student mixes up the vowel sound, it doesn't sound right, what do? How would you correct that?
You could just do big, and then maybe pull up a letter like the E and then the I, and say, and so you can mirror what's on the screen and say big, and then hold the E and try to get them to
That's a great way to prompt it.
I love that. No one has ever had that plan, but I really like that plan.
That's awesome. That's like another level. So good. Yeah, absolutely. So that's a great way to prompt your student to fix the pronunciation, right? Absolutely. Yep. So we want to be sure that we are being creative. We got to be able to think on our feet a little bit with error correction, but hopefully now that we've gone through the 3 error misses, you kind of have an idea of what you can expect from our students. And now you have the 4 steps for positively correcting. So you should be good to go, right? You come to a slide like this and you're like, I bet the student will mispronounce this, and here's how I can correct it, right? That's kind of the thinking on a slide like this. Okay, cool. So we just went through our 4-question framework. Any questions about the questions before we keep going? Do you have any questions? I love how everyone's participating so nicely. That's awesome. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, so we are moving on to a new vocabulary slide. Okay, a new vocabulary slide. So this is our slide that we're working with. The first question we ask ourselves is, what is the objective, right? Or what is the point? So I'll give you a minute to look at it. I'll read the bottom to you in case it's a little too small. So the bottom says, student practices ball by answering the question, what does he or she play with, right? It should say with. And answering it with, he plays with a ball and she plays with a ball. Okay, so answering the question, what does he or she play with he plays with a ball and she plays with a ball. Okay, so looking at the slide, looking at that description at the bottom, fact that it's a practicing vocabulary slide, what do we think is the objective here? Anybody want to sum it up for us?
Well, get the student to learn the word ball, probably with TPR at first, repeat it back and forth, and then have them prompt it themselves. So he plays with get them to repeat ball on cue, and then hopefully they can repeat it back.
Absolutely, absolutely. So Sarah was thinking even like before this slide, right? So typically this slide would come, I know I said new vocabulary slide, it's kind of a practicing new vocabulary slide. So our students would have already been introduced to the word ball, right? So we could always kind of come to a slide like this and see if our student knows the word ball before we keep moving. But absolutely, I love the idea of introducing ball with TPR because like we said, the student can do that with you and it will help to prompt your student later on if your student can't remember the word. So yeah, for sure. Anybody else have any other thoughts on that? Any other thoughts on what we should get our student to do on this slide? Yes, Scott.
Just so I'm clear, when you begin this slide, you would say, "What is she playing with?" Just jump right in.
You could do that. Your student may not know exactly what you're doing. Or your student might say back to you, "What is he playing with?" Right? Your student might just repeat it back to you because
Okay.
at this level, a lot of what they're used to is repeating. Right? So we always want to kind of be mindful of that at these lower level student classes, like in these classes, that they're probably going to repeat if there's a question and answer. But that's something I definitely wanted you all to get out of this slide and out of the objective is that we need to be sure our student gets that this is a question and answer. Because at first glance, this slide is a little confusing to a non-native speaker, or it could be, right? Because if the objective, like it says here at the bottom in the description, right? If the objective has to do with them doing question and answer, but the slide doesn't have a question on it, that's confusing, right? That can be really confusing because the students used to, like a lot of times on conversational slides like this, it would actually just have like one picture with one character saying this, little speech bubble, one character saying that. So they know question, answer, right? But on one like this, it's a little confusing because it's just answer, answer, where's the question? Right? So we need to find a way to get our student to not only identify the word ball, like we said, that's important, right? Not only to identify the word ball, but also to be able to use it in a sentence and to be able to do question and answer. Whew, there's a lot going on here. It didn't look like it. So yeah, our objectives, get that conversation going, right? Using that new vocabulary. Okay, so moving on to question number 2.
Okay, what materials would you use? We know we have a multi-step objective here. So my student and I are going to go through a couple of different levels of work quickly on this slide. So Sarah kind of already alluded to this a little, but what could I do to help my student get that full sentence? What might I want to use? There's more than one answer.
Would it be possible to use a ball or make movement with your hand as if you were playing with the ball?
Yeah, those are the two things I would choose from. TPR kinds of things or a real thing, a real ball of some sort. Or I've got paper balls as well. And those definitely work in a pinch. They're nice and easy to store.
I also wanted to ask, are they supposed to be able to identify the different genders? Like when it says he plays, she plays, do I have to explain to them the gender?
Well, since it's used, it's a good question. Since it's used in a sentence, we can assume the student probably already knows it. That does not mean that they won't sometimes switch them by mistake. But our focus here is mostly on getting the word ball into the sentence. And then to help prevent confusion, what I would do is circle who I'm talking about. So I would do that quick circle and release to indicate which side of the screen we're looking at. Make sure my student and I are on the same side, quite literally, on this slide. So once we have indicated on the screen and gotten that word ball into the complete sentence, the next part of our objective is this question and answer. And Tina already told us that a lower level student is likely to go, what does he play with? What does he play with? Not what we want to have happen. Have you seen anyone on YouTube maybe, or have your own ideas about what you can do to help a student differentiate between a question and an answer? there's one fabulous prop for this.
Puppets.
Yes, Sarah.
Puppets.
Yes, most definitely. So we're kind of moving into question 3 with the puppet, because the puppet is going to help us significantly with the words so that we don't keep getting the same question back to us, because it's a never-ending loop otherwise. So do you want me to just keep going, Tina?
No, it's okay. I just wanted to check. Roxanne, did you have a question?
Yes, when I took the coaching class for the mock, they were very specific about when you come to a slide like this that you start with the question. So I'm a little bit confused, because I understand what you're saying, that the child might just repeat that question back. But for the mock, I think, are they looking for us to just say the question first because that's what they're expecting to hear, or?
I mean,
I don't know.
different mock class mentors have different preferences. I've not heard of one having that preference before, or whoever led that session. I've not heard of that before. So unless that's something brand new, that might have just been that person's preference. I personally would break it down a little bit more, just because real students would probably just repeat the question back to you. So, I mean, it's totally your call whether you want to do it like that person said, or you want to do it like how we're demonstrating. It's totally your call, you know, but yeah.
I think it would definitely be best to keep it to where the student's gonna actually learn. So I think what you're saying makes more sense.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
I mean,
I have to agree with that. I always practice the answer first, unless I have a couple students who I know I don't need to, but I only know that because I have dozens and dozens of classes with them. For most kids, we practice the answer once and then the puppet comes in, because this is how I make it so that my students do not just keep asking the question back to me. The puppet is the confused one. The puppet asks all the questions. I only say an answer. That way my student can model their answer after me. So when I pull the puppet up, the puppet will ask me the question and I'll answer. We'll have a little mini conversation here. And then the puppet will turn to the student, ask the question again, and the student will answer the question. So it looks something like this. What does he play with? He plays with a ball. What does he play with?
He plays with a ball.
And if my student doesn't know what to say at that point, that's okay, because I can jump back in. He plays with, and maybe even just say the beginning of the sentence and see if my student can give me back the answer. Because if I've started with the answer first, I know my student is capable of saying the answer. They might just be a little confused with what the puppet's doing, right? So after my puppet has asked the question, if I can give them the beginning of the answer, but then see if my student can kind of go from there, that gives them a little more independence and responsibility, and they can hopefully do the rest themselves.
Yeah, for sure. Sierra, do you have a question?
I do. So when we start this slide, it's best to do something like our TPR, like a ball first, and then that's when we go into the question with the puppet. What does he play with?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many ways that you could approach this slide. That's definitely one way. You could, if you think your student might know the word ball, you could just like underline it. What do you see, right? See if they can say a ball. And then you can just see if they can say the sentence, and then you can do the question and answer with the puppet. So you're kind of building, like 1, see if they can say a ball, 2, see if they can say the sentence, 3, see if you can do a conversation with them. So it's all up to you. You really have a lot of flexibility on these slides. So however you want to get your student to that objective is A-okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Good question, Sierra. Okay, awesome. And then Lisa, were you going to add anything?
If I was, I've forgotten what it is.
I'm sorry. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I think we got it. With the puppet in there asking the questions, then there really aren't any extra words that you need to use.
Yeah. So the words you're using are just to guide your student through the slide, right? So however you decide to build out this slide, you can do that. Use your puppet, have your puppet be the confused one, right? Something else that's kind of helpful is to make it more obvious that you're talking to your puppet, kind of make it a little bit more of a conversation as opposed to both facing. Sometimes people do that and it's just as confusing that way. Just kind of turn towards each other a little bit. You don't have to be like in a private conversation, but like, you know, a little bit towards each other. That helps out a lot. And you can use your student's name too. I definitely recommend using your student's name often throughout the class to keep your students' attention. So, you know, Dino could say, Tina, what does he play with? He plays with a ball. Roxanne, what does he play with?
He plays with a ball.
Good, Roxanne. Totally wasn't expecting you to do that, but that's totally cool. All right.
And then, yes, Annette wrote, do you ask both parts he plays and she plays? Yes, I would move on to the next part. If my student was able to fill in ball and say the sentence and answer the question really well with the he side of the slide, I'd probably be a little more hands-off on the she side and let my student just go for it because they seem to understand the concept. If my student had struggled, I'd start off with the she side, like way back down at getting ball in the sentence and then saying the whole sentence and, you know, build it back up slower for that student.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about adjusting for our student.
Yeah.
And speaking of adjusting for our student, question 4, Lisa.
What errors could we anticipate? So take a look at this slide in particular. What do you think might happen?
Dropping of the S and article.
Yeah, especially that article is like shoved in the bottom corner. If you have a student who's actually relying on their reading, they could just visually skip right over that. And since it doesn't make it, it makes sense when you're thinking like Mandarin to English to not have an extra word there. It's really easy to just skip that article on this slide. So what do you think you might do if you hear a missing article? Which plan would you use?
Well, asking the question back, he play with ball, and use the fingers, he play with ball, and then try and see if they can correct you back. If they can't manage that, maybe he plays with a ball and try to get them to repeat back.
Nice, yeah. Yeah, there's many ways that you can correct that error. Another way, those are both 2 really good ways, and then another way, actually Tina has already circled the on the screen. Sometimes if you have a student who is a good reader, you can just indicate the error with a circle and have them read it again, and because of that circle, they'll read it correctly the second time. I use that a lot with my level 4 and 5 students. Yeah, and let's see if we remember, what is important at the beginning and end of an error correction?
Praise.
Praise, yes. So come up with a couple of short, so you don't always have to say the exact same phrase, right? Phrase. Come up with a couple short and easy praise phrases that you can whip out there to sandwich your error corrections.
Awesome.
Okay.
So any questions before we jump into our last type of teaching slide that we'll cover? Any questions? No? All right, cool. Okay, so our last type of teaching slide is about creating full sentences. So the objective here should be pretty easy. What is the objective on this slide? Give you a second to look at it. All right, what's the point of this slide? What's the objective? What should we hear from our student? Hopefully we don't hear a bunch of silence. Oh, all the hands are coming up. Kim, yes, what should we hear?
You should hear the students say, I throw a ball.
Yeah, absolutely. Should we stop at that and just move on to the next slide?
No, you can ask further questions, like maybe what color is the ball, if they know that already.
Yeah, I love it. Absolutely. Great job, Kim. Yeah, so this is a free talk slide. So yes, we do typically want to be sure that we answer the main question that's at the bottom here, right? That we get our student to answer that, but then we can take it wherever we want, right? Typically, free talk slides come at the end of a lesson, near the very end of the lesson, so it's kind of like a culminating activity. So ideally, we would incorporate vocabulary we've been using, sentence structures we've been using, right? So you wanna, those are probably top of mind for you anyway. Pretty easy to do free talk slides in my opinion. But it kind of depends on your student, right? So when we come to a slide like this, we kind of want to think about having two different types of students that could show up in our classroom, right? So we either have the student who's like all excited because yes, I get to talk, I can talk as much as I want, blah, 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 I'm just going to tell you all about my day and this and that and the other thing, right? You have that superstar student, or you have the student who comes to this slide and is like, oh no, where are the words? Where are the words? I can't read anything. I'm going to shut down right now, right? You have the students who are used to reading things out of a textbook, and that's how they're used to reading English or learning English, right? And so all throughout the lesson, they've had words that they can kind of rely on, right? They've had that crutch throughout the lesson. Now they don't have that. And they're like, ooh. So we want to think about both of those types of students when we're planning how to teach the slide. So the objective is the same. We want to get them talking, but we would approach it a little differently. So let's talk about that a little bit more. Materials.
Okay, so for the deer in the headlight student who all of a sudden realizes there's nothing to rely on this slide, we're going to want to use our materials to support their language. Do you have any ideas of what you might do when you get a from a student?
I mean, specifically for this slide, you could pull up the ball prop. I think it would be best to have an actual tangible ball, maybe not just a cutout. So you can maybe throw it up in the air a little bit and kind of loosen the tension.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I actually love this slide too because I can throw at my student. You throw at your webcam. Just don't get carried away and knock over your laptop. I've had a couple teachers in our group have had that happen before. But yeah, and loosening the tension is a great suggestion. Anything funny or, you know, kind of just different from the normal, really straight-laced, stern teacher that you can do is great. Do it.
As Zena said, use a puppet.
Yeah.
Puppets are great too.
Yes, and then a puppet can model the language for you or with you, and that can help release the tension and give your student a model to follow. So yeah, any TPR that you've used earlier, any kind of visual prop, a puppet, those things will all help support the students so they don't feel quite so all alone on this slide with no words. Yeah. Well, what about that student who is ready to talk and knows a lot of things and could keep going? What kind of materials might you want on hand?
Scott.
Like maybe little manipulatives of a gentleman and a lady and a young child, and you know, a little thing. What is this? Is a man, this is a woman, this is a boy, this is a girl, this is a tree, you know, but elicit it from them.
Right, yeah. A lot of times our students will know mom, dad, grandpa, baby. They'll know those person words. And you can take that target question, what do you do with a ball? And you can just change the pronoun. That's one of the easiest little baby steps into extending a lesson is just change the pronoun. What does he do with the ball? What does she do with the ball? Your student is having to give you back the answer using the appropriate pronoun. And I see in the chat box, ask specific questions. Yeah, so family members are a great place to go. Colors, Kim had mentioned colors. What color is the ball? Anything you see on the picture of the slide is usually something you can kind of incorporate into your next questions, which is sort of getting into question 3, Tina.
Yeah, so question 3 is what words will I say? So we want to also think about kind of the natural progression of questions. Like we wouldn't, even if we had a really stellar student, we probably wouldn't come to this slide and immediately be like, what color or what print pattern is on dad's shirt, right? Like that's just like I plus 1,000, right? That's like way too complicated. So we want to think about building that gradually as we go, right? So and this is kind of true for the student who needed a little more help too. Like if your student needed a little more help, maybe you don't start with this question. Maybe you would start with, what is this? Or what do you see? And then you build up to the, what do you do with a ball? Right? But from there, you can make it a little more complicated. So I know Lisa likes to have a couple of different types of sports balls with her. And so she'll kind of give options, right? So I might say, which ball do you like to play with? A soccer ball or a basketball? Right? And if you have that student who's like ready for more, they will have no issue saying soccer ball, basketball, right? Or I like to play soccer, I like to play basketball, something like that. And then you can go into, well, what do you do with a basketball? Do you kick a basketball, right? Do you, right? And they should be able to say, I throw a basketball. So however you want to get practicing what you've been using throughout the lesson is totally fine. It's a free talk slide. Have fun with it. I suggest when you are preparing to teach a free talk slide, have like a list of questions kind of that you've thought of, right? It doesn't need to be a long list, but maybe just a few questions in case you freeze up and you're a new teacher and you're like, I don't know what to ask, right? Maybe have a few questions there to fall back on, but then just roll with whatever your student gives you, right? And if your student says like, oh, I like basketball, right? Okay, then perfect. Now you can talk about something your student cares about. So then talk more about basketball. Jimmy, what do you do with your basketball? You know, who do you play with? Who do you play basketball with? You know, the best thing you can do is extend it and then also relate it to your student's life, because then they're going to practice it at home. That's kind of our ultimate goal, right? Okay, so
and speaking of words as well, if any of you are going to go into your mock 4-5 with the older, more fluent students, think about the starting word of your question, because that will help you a little bit with the difficulty level of the question. So things that are recalling, like where or who questions are easier questions, or like when Tina held up the basketball and the soccer, that's a close-ended question. You're giving two choices. Those are simpler questions. On the other end of the spectrum, you have the questions that start with why, or what do you think, or what would happen if. And those kinds of beginnings of questions, or how is another one. Those beginnings are much deeper thought. And so in a level 4-5 class, you're going to want to ask more of those why and how and what do you think kinds of questions that our lower level students just aren't ready for yet in English. They're capable of it in their native language, but they have a little longer until they're capable of it in English. So upper level students, think upper level questions whenever you can get to them.
Awesome. Okay, thanks, Lisa. And then our last question is, what errors can I anticipate? What do you think might happen here that would require you to jump in and help?
Scott's going like, phew.
I saw he like backed up. He's like, I don't think I have enough time for this. What do you think you would hear, Scott?
My imagination runs wild. Again, honestly, they would be basic questions that would be why, if the child thinks that this is a mother and a father, again, they would be, why is mommy a different color than daddy? And that would be a question where I would go,
moving on. No.
Next slide.
Yeah. Typically, you won't get students at this level asking many questions to the teacher. I have some upper level students that will ask me all sorts of questions, but typically, like, you wouldn't get a lot of questions. I guess what I was thinking more was like, what might your student leave out? Or what might your student try to say that won't come out correctly? You know what I mean? Anybody have ideas? I see Lucy said lack of articles. Yeah, absolutely. You might say, you know, what do you do with the ball? The student says, I throw ball. Okay, what do we do with that? What do we do if our student says, I throw ball? Anybody want to correct me?
Well, you could go, good job, and then maybe be like, I throw ball, then I throw a ball, or see if they'll, you know, do the A on their own terms. If they can't, then added in with the count. And then,
Yes.
of course, when they get it, good job.
Yes.
Yeah.
Love it. Love it. Nice job. Yeah. So we could really get any sort of errors here. Something that I would consider to be an error that technically, I guess, isn't, is just getting silence, right? If your student just freezes and you're like, okay, we got to back up, right? And then you can start by asking simpler questions. What do you see? You know, what color is the ball, right? Colors are very simple for our students. And then you kind of build as you go. But if your student actually did try and gave you like a jumbly mess, what I like to do is I like to give them something they can work with after class. So if they said, you know, they just started rambling on this. They're like, oh, he throw ball, she throw ball, orange, whoa, tree, this. You know, if your student's like all over the place and it doesn't make a lot of sense, be like, good, Susan. Okay, I throw a ball, right? And you might want to type it in the chat box. So a lot of times when I'm on a free talk slide, I love to type in the chat box just a sentence that my student can take home and work on and come back to class with, right? And it's really nice for me as the teacher to do that, because then I remember what I taught them, because I can look back at the class and see the notes I made. And then I can also copy those notes and put them in my feedback to the students and their parents. So I can say, please practice this sentence at home, something like that. So it's, you know, it's really helpful, I think, to have something in the chat box so that, you know, that jumbled mess comes down into a sentence or two that they can practice.
Yeah, and my students seem to appreciate that too, because
Yeah.
a lot of times they know that it's coming out as a scrambled eggs, right? And but they're at least saying something, and they know that I like when they say something, so it comes out as scrambled eggs, and I go, oh, and then I do this up on the screen so they know I'm going to type, because it takes me a second, right? Oh, and then I type in the sentence. You said I throw a ball. And then they feel, then they're like, yes, that's what I said, teacher, you know, and they'll do it with me. So I like that method too.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so we just went through our 4 questions. Any questions about the question framework or anything we've been talking about? I know that's a loaded question. No? Okay. Okay, so our next step, like we said in the beginning of this session, is you do. So it's not enough just to come and hang out and practice with us. We want you to practice at home. So we suggest finding a practice buddy. You can either find someone in this group, you can ask in the hiring support group on Facebook. You could recruit a friend or someone just to help you out. Typically, it's better if you can practice with someone who's more familiar with VIPKid. So that's why it's really helpful. A lot of times people will ask in the Facebook group, anybody want to practice the mock 2-3 tonight? You know, and typically people will be like, oh yeah, and then they'll Facebook message and meet up. So that's actually something that people started doing without us even suggesting it. We ended up adding that to the session because people did it and passed really fast in their mock classes because they got good practice. So we thought that was a great idea. So anyway, if you decide to do that, if you want to practice, then we recommend creating a free Zoom account at zoom.us. Then schedule a time to chat. So whoever schedules it, you just create the event, super easy, and then just share the link with your new friend. And then you go ahead and practice at your scheduled time. So I wanted to show you, this is what it looks like if you are the host. So I'm the host, so this is what my screen typically looks like. It's very easy on Zoom to share your screen and then write on your screen. So we suggest having the slides pulled up in a separate window, and then you just click share and then choose what you want to share, and bam, everybody in the room can see it, right? And then if you are not the host, if you're the other person, we suggest going up to view options, right? View options, and then annotate. I think
you can actually do it right now if you would like
to. You all
to.
can draw. You can doodle on the screen if you want.
Come doodle.
Come doodle. So you go to view options and then annotate. So this is how, if you were pretending to be the student, you would practice writing on the screen. Right? I see some people doodling. That's awesome. Something that you should know is if you are the host and you, ooh, look at that, Sierra. If you are the host and you switch to the next slide, it will automatically clear for you. If you are not the host, it all stays there. So you would want to go in and erase it. I don't really care if you erase it right now. I just wanted to give you that heads up. Okay, so we wanted to thank you for being here. We don't take it lightly that you spent your afternoon with us. We want to thank you for encouraging each other. We love when we see in the Facebook group and people are excited to cheer each other on. I think that's so awesome. We thank you for keeping these resources confidential so that we can continue to help people like you, and then for choosing to bring us along with you. It really means the world to us, so thank you so much. Okay, so we wanted to be sure that you knew that VIPKid also offers coaching. It sounded like, who mentioned coaching? I'm trying to remember. Somebody had just gone to
I
coaching.
don't remember, but somebody did.
Roxanne, I think. I don't see Roxanne now. But I think Roxanne was the one who mentioned that she had been to coaching.
Yeah. So here's the link.
Oh, thank you, Lisa. So yeah, the coaching through VIPKid is awesome too. They typically will focus more on specific slides. Like if you're preparing for your 2-3, they will focus on the 2-3 slides. So I would definitely recommend, you know, if you're able to go to that, double dip, come to our session and then go to theirs, right? I'm going to stop sharing my screen. So we're going to say hello to everybody. Hello, everybody. So lovely. Okay. Okay, yeah, let's hop into some questions. I see Lucy's kicking it off for us. She said, any tips on the SMART demo? It'll be okay. So the SMART demo is designed to be super easy. It's simple, it's done on your smartphone. So try not to overthink it too much. You will definitely want to have a teaching background up behind you. That's something that they've recently started looking for more.
Oh,
and just have a few props handy as well. So basically how that works is you will do a 5-question quiz, and it's timed. I think you have 90 seconds for each question. And then after the quiz, then they will show you a teaching slide, just one slide, and you'll have 2.5 minutes to teach it, right? And when I say you have 2.5 minutes, you can keep re-recording it and trashing it as many times as you want. It's not like a once and done kind of thing. And you can like go and kind of gather if you want to print something off or draw something on your board. Like you don't have to immediately record it, but I wouldn't let it sit or like, you know, let the app kind of, I don't know, whatever apps do. I feel like sometimes I go back and I'm like, where'd it go, right? I wouldn't dilly-dally too much. I would still try to get it done within like an hour of when you start the process, but it really doesn't take that long. They're basically looking to make sure that you can teach like a VIPKid teacher. So as long as you are kind of demonstrating those skills and you have good energy, right, then usually you're okay.
And you will want to figure out a way to prop your phone up. You can't hold it.
Yeah, because otherwise, you know.
Like,
you need a third hand.
Scott has a tripod. Nice.
Oh wow.
I know I have a pop socket, so I will just stick it over my laptop if I need to. So that's some. Oh, maybe yours wouldn't do that, but I bet you could prop it up against a window or something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, cool. Let's see here. Sarah said, tips on the FastPass days offered in nearby cities. I think I would prefer to do that instead of one of the recorded demos or live sessions. Yeah, so the FastPass coaching days are really awesome. So those are just in some of the major cities across the US and sometimes Toronto. And basically you go, I think usually 2.5 to 4 hours is what they block off for that.
Yeah,
and you get to, you get to practice your teaching skills. Basically what the FastPass does is it's in-person practice and it lets you skip the demo or interview, right? And so you just kind of skip that.
What that does is it goes straight onto the no-fail mock section.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And really the only way that I've seen people fail after that point is if they really weren't a good fit in the first place, like if they are not a native or native enough sounding speaker, or if they maybe weren't super honest on their application, right? Like typically the no fail zone, like you're in the clear, you can keep trying, right? So but the FastPass days are really nice for people who want to get more like hands-on in-person practice. Yep. How do you make sure your timing is right during a lesson, not taking too long on a slide? Oh, this is such a good question, Sarah. If a student is having trouble understanding or too fast and running out of time at the end, I will be perfectly honest with you, Sierra. My biggest struggle still is timing and pacing as a VIPKid teacher, because I'm super thorough, and so it's really difficult for me to let something go. Like if my student is struggling with something, I'm like, no, we are gonna get this, right? And I will try really, really hard, but sometimes I have to kind of let that go and remember that this is a longer lesson, right? So sometimes if an overarching objective, let's say that there are a few phonics slides in the lesson and they all have to do with like beg, like the egg sound, right? Maybe my student didn't quite get it on the first slide, but guess what? We have 2 or 3 more slides practicing that. So I kind of have to, that's good enough until we can practice it more, right? So you kind of have to learn what to let go of as you go. And sometimes you can make activities easier if you need to, right? If your student is really struggling and there are 10 sentences they're supposed to practice on a slide, maybe you choose 5, right? Maybe you see how you can get them to do 1 and then see what your time is like. You know, it's all about adjusting. If your student is too fast, you want to try to extend as you go, instead of having a ton of extra time at the end, which typically there's like a free talk slide at the end, so you could just talk a lot at the end, but I try to extend as I go if I find that my student is like super ready for the lesson, right? Super fast. So typically it's about a minute per slide. So I like to keep an eye on the time, and like, let's say that I'm at minute 15 and I'm only on slide 4. I need to pick up the pace, right? Hopefully it doesn't come to that point. But also in your actual classes, you will give stars on the screen. They're virtual stars. And I like to give them about every 5 minutes, and it kind of helps me to keep on pace too. So, you know, I will see that it's been about 5 minutes. I better make sure that I'm giving a star and I'm about a 1/5 of the way done, right? So there's actually, we host another live coaching session called Getting Booked. The next one is on Wednesday. And in that session, we talk about kind of preparing for classes and pacing and all those types of things. So if you pass your mock before Wednesday or on Wednesday, you can definitely join us for that. Starting next week, we will be recording those sessions so that you can watch them whenever, so you don't have to be with us at a certain time. And then we will be doing a live Q&A, kind of as an alternative to that. So you can get the content whenever you want and then just come for the live Q&A portion. So that's kind of how we're changing it up starting next week.
I have one little thing to add about pacing as a brand new teacher or in the hiring process. The thing that I see happen more often than anything else is people get too bogged down and they just can't get through the content. Most of the time in the hiring process or as a brand new teacher, you don't have extra time at the end.
Yeah,
the problem is going too slow. And the number one reason that teachers are going too slow through the content is they're saying too many words.
Yeah.
So the more you practice that question number 3 of really only saying the simplest form of what you really need to get the point across, the easier your pacing will be.
Yeah, for sure. Let's see here. Oh yes, everyone, you can save the chat. That's a great idea. I know there's a lot of good tips in here. So yeah, you would just click the 3 dots where it says more and then save chat, and it should save somewhere on your device. But yeah, let's see here. So do you have lighting recommendations or backdrops? So lighting really depends on what you're working with. If you have good natural light in your room, you probably won't need as many lights, but you also have to think about the time of day when you'll be teaching, right? Because sometimes you'll be teaching in the middle of the night and even though you have a window, it's worthless to you, right? So there are a lot of different lighting options. I think this is something that people have talked about a good bit in the Facebook group, so you can go and see what lighting other people have. I know people have shared some pictures. I'll show you real quick. Mine is a lot fancier than when I started, I'll just tell you that much. So I actually got these for videos, but I use them for teaching now. I just have like these shadow box lights, but you certainly don't need something that fancy. Before I got those, I just had a little clip-on selfie light that was on my computer, and then I had like a, you know, Medusa head light that was off to the side, right? So I kind of was trying to balance. So when you're thinking about lighting, you want to think about balance and having things bounce off. Yeah, Scott, your lighting looks really nice. I was like, oh, did I offend you? Oh, I said it looked nice.
If I can, I just closed my window blind, so this is just the natural light in my room and 2 additional LEDs. Does this look okay? Are the shadows
When you lift up your arms, I see the shadows a little bit more.
Okay,
So
okay.
I would say maybe bring some lights kind of around you instead of, are they just like right in front of you?
Yeah, about 6 feet.
Kind of, yeah, okay. Maybe
Left and
see
right.
if you can bring one that's like closer around your head, and maybe not even facing your head, but kind of facing up. Like especially if you have a white ceiling, like Lisa, she bounces her lights off the ceiling and it bounces back down.
I feel like
Right.
I'm playing pool in here, right? Because it's like I have everything angled so that it goes kind of behind me. So it's all about, it's like all very geometry driven.
Exactly. And you may need to play around with the lighting also with avoiding glare. So I know Lisa has, can you tell us about what you did with your name sign?
Oh yeah, so these are magnetic. This is a oil pan behind me, so all my stuff is on magnets to make it easy to change when I feel like it. But anything that's laminated or like a whiteboard, you get glare. So I put more magnets on the top than I did on the bottom, so that pushes the top out just a little bit more. So my sign is actually slightly angled, like from the side it would look like this instead of straight on. And I do the same thing with my screen and my glasses too. Everything has to be just tipped just the slightest bit, and it makes a huge difference in the amount of glare.
Yeah. And you might want to see if somebody can help you figure out your lighting too. So something that's really nice is if you can kind of sit or stand where you plan to teach and then tell the other person, okay, turn off that light. Okay, move this that way. And you can just watch what it looks like on your camera. So you're not running and coming back. Oh, was I sitting in the right spot? You know, so just something to think about. Another thing with Zoom. So we encourage you to practice in Zoom. Even if you don't feel like practicing with somebody else, you can still use a Zoom account and record yourself and watch it back. It's probably the best tool that you can use if you plan to practice by yourself. So it's really, really nifty. And then you can like play with the lighting, right, in Zoom also. Let's see, Sierra said, is the scheduling for the mock class always in China's time zone? So when you see the schedule on there, it should be in whatever time zone you set up when you created your account. So when you created your VIPKid account, you probably chose the nearest big city, right? So like I know mine, it was like I chose New York City or something because that's the right time zone. So it should show up in whatever time zone you should be in, but definitely that's something that you want to pay attention to. The mock classes in particular, this is kind of a different train of thought. The mock classes are hosted by mock class mentors who are usually American or Canadian because they're VIPKid teachers, right? So yeah, that's different train of thought, but I just wanted to let you know that you probably will have a nicer variety of times that probably will be nicer in your schedule for the mock class because those people are on your time zone too, probably. So just something to think about. Awesome. Okay, any other questions?
I was to say it's funny that it's nice that VIPKid has our bookings page as hired teachers in our own time zones, and then the mock schedule in our own time zones, because all the back and forth with figuring out what time it is and in all the different time zones, like I have to think really, really hard about it. Like every time Tina and I meet, right, I have to double check it like twice in my head to make sure I've done it correctly. But yeah, do pay attention to if you sign up for workshops, either before you're hired or after, those are not necessarily in your time zone or China's time zone. So definitely look for the little letters, read carefully.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you all so much for being here. It was so much fun to have you all. I loved the participation. And yeah, we really do encourage you to practice with someone or at least get Zoom and practice by yourself and watch it back. You would be amazed by what you do and you don't realize that you do it. Trust me, I did it. But anyway, it was so nice to have you all here. We hope to see you in the Getting Booked session on Wednesday or in the live Q&A next week. And yeah, feel free to send us emails if you have any specific questions that you don't think the group can help you with, although we do spend a lot of time on the group helping out with those questions. And yeah, we look forward to continuing to help you, and you are going to absolutely love being a VIPKid teacher.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.